questioning more than anything else is the idea of, let's call it American greatness. Tract of land, either bought or stolen, when I look at even that, call it the United States of America, but the people who live in the United States of America call themselves Americans. But people who live in Canada and people who live in Central America and people who live in South America also consider themselves to be Americans. Look at the people that, when I look at the people that came out and settled this land, the European settlers, I see a great hardiness in them, a great striving. Dangerous travels over vast expanses of land. Settling out in as yet uncharted territory. Building homes, communities, towns, cities. But then I see this force that comes behind them and claims credit for that. As if the people who traveled and the people who explored and the people who settled, as if they had sprung forth from that force. Claim credit for anything that is done within its so-called domain. But that force itself, whatever it is, I don't see that it has anything in of itself to offer. And so the power of that force has been obtained not by its own right, but again by claiming privilege to the rights of those who settled this land. It claimed privilege over the rights of those who settled this land thousands of years ago, and their children and their children's children. privilege over the rights of those who came later and settled this land. To me, there's nothing purely American about that. The way I look at it now is that it's more an ancient force that's been doing the same thing over and over again, under the guise of various different governances throughout the ages. It is a force that itself is incapable of anything except maybe to rob, to kill, and to destroy. And that by guile, intimidation, force, manipulation. But it has never and can never do anything besides kill, steal, and destroy. By whatever device it chooses to do that. And here and now, in this day and age, I see the largesse of its largesse of its presence. See, for a long time it needs to cloak itself as it grows. It disguises itself, whether in the robes of the clergy or the aldermen, or the publican or the politician. But eventually it always comes out in its true and, I suppose, its natural form. Though its natural form is unnatural. The true way of things. Now, of course, when I was younger, I once heard it said that history repeats itself because people forget their history. But it seems to me now more that history repeats itself because that annihilating force cannot help but to be what it is. And that is, to my understanding, a force that is evil and at odds with the natural order of things. And it seeks to ingratiate itself into the natural order of things by presenting itself in different forms as something that is beneficial or something that is necessary, or something that is even beautiful, perhaps, when it is itself, in fact, ugly and horrific. And when it always, when it comes to its full form, it then poisons everything that it touches. By corrupting it, by manipulating it, by changing the form of things that once were. Not so much by changing them, but by corrupting them. And I guess what I mean by that is that it's not so much a matter of changing something as it is a matter of corrupting it, degrading it. So let's say, for the sake of this line of thought, that to change something is to renew it, and that to corrupt something is to degrade it, so that we don't have a misunderstanding of what I mean when I use the word change, so that we do not have a misunderstanding when I use the word corruption. Now, a thing may wear out over time. That's only natural. A pair of shoes, or a suit of clothes, or an old house, or an old truck. But to corrupt it is to corrupt the use of the house, is to corrupt the use of the shoes, is to corrupt the use of the old truck. Nothing about the shoes themselves changes. Nothing about the house itself changes. Nothing about the old truck changes. But the use to which it is put changes. Or rather, does not change, but is corrupted. So if the use of the shoes is corrupted, let's say that a man receives a pair of shoes and he wears those shoes as he goes about his work. And while wearing those shoes, he is honest and diligent. And then let us say that that man, as time goes on, begins to use those shoes to rob, to kill, to destroy, whatever it may be. It is not the shoes themselves that have changed, it is the use of the shoes that has been corrupted. And the same would go for a house or a truck, or for anything. So I guess when I'm thinking about American greatness, or the greatness of any people, I'm not thinking of it in terms of how things used to be, or the good old days, or boy don't you remember when. I'm thinking of the fact that that greatness is still there, but the use of that greatness has become corrupted. The expression of that greatness has become corrupted. And so everything that I see around it So when I look at everything that I see around it, I see the symptoms of that corruption. But those symptoms are not the corruption itself. They are simply signs of the disease, signs of the corruption. So I guess in terms of the way that I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about a change for the better or change for the worse. I'm saying that when I look at change, I see change as a thing so let's say the shoes I wear as I go about living my life, working well, being diligent, being honest. Let's say that those shoes wear out over time, which is only natural. A thing wears out over time. When the time comes, I change those shoes. It's a new pair of shoes, sure, but the way in which I choose to live my life is not, in fact, new. Now, if my old shoes wear out and I put on a new pair of shoes and I think of myself differently, perhaps they are a very fancy pair of shoes and I start thinking to myself that I am rather swell in my brand new pair of shoes, then in doing so, I have laid the seeds of the corruption of the use of my shoes. So they might still be a very nice pair of shoes, but I have corrupted the use of those shoes through my pride, through my arrogance, through my narcissistic self-fulfillment. But if I blame the shoes, I've in fact done a wrong thing, because I can change my shoes and yet continue to live my life working diligently and doing well and treating others with respect. Likewise, if I change my shoes, let's say that I have worn my shoes as a man who robs, steals, kills, destroys, what have you. Let's say I change those shoes thinking that that will cause me to stop stealing and destroying and killing. Well, again, that won't do anything different. It doesn't matter that I've changed the shoes. The use to which I put the shoes is still corrupted. And if I look at a man like that and I say to myself, well, that man, he's got a new pair of shoes and yet he's still doing the same old things. And I say to myself, well, the best thing for him to do would be to change his shoes again, and then perhaps he won't do these kinds of things anymore. Then I myself have confused the nature of change and corruption. You know, every so often the individuals under the sway of this force, they change their verbiage, they change their positions on things. But they do nothing to change the corruption within themselves. And so the veneer of the change only lasts for a little while. Well, he's got a new suit of clothes. Well, this guy talks like someone I can get along with. This guy talks like he's one of us. When in reality, all the guy did was put on a new suit that mimicked the way he thinks I would like to see him dressed. But he goes on killing, stealing, and destroying, so eventually, after enough iterations of this change, without any repentance from the corruption itself, without anything done to remove himself from the corruption to which he has subjected himself, I start to think to myself, well, change is useless and pointless, and there's no sense in doing anything. And I have the temptation to become apathetic, lethargic, or angry, vengeful, hateful. Because in a certain sense, I'm looking at the symptoms of the thing and I'm thinking to myself, well, treating the symptoms doesn't work. The disease keeps on getting worse. Things keep on getting worse. I guess there's no sense in change at all. You see, the problem is that a man can change his suit. He can change his manner of speaking. He can change his position on this matter or that matter. He can, as they like to say, flip-flop his opinions. But if it's an issue at the heart of the thing, then it doesn't matter how many things the man changes. If the heart of the thing is corrupt, if the heart of the thing is evil, then no amount of change will do anything for it. Except perhaps to roll it on down the road a little ways. Because something that I've noticed in the change is that a man puts on the suit or says the right things and talks in the way that people expect him to talk just long enough so that he can be assigned his position in a seat of what he likes to call power, what he likes to call authority. And having done so, since he is now wearing the suit of those others who have done the exact same thing, then he finds himself in the privileged position to act out that corruption. And I say act out that corruption, but perhaps instead I should say he finds himself in the unique position where he is able to perform under the sway of that corruption. Oh, so close. Almost made it. Well, maybe try again another time. Ah, you almost had it, Bubba. And how long does that keep on going for? You know, the guy in the other setup, the one off to the side whose whole goal by dressing and talking a certain kind of a way is to get people to think that there is hope. But really all he's doing, his sole job, and the job for which he is paid very well, is to distract people from the corruption. But that man himself being corrupt, it serves his first interests, his best interests, to serve corruption. Because you see, stark and naked, corruption is an ugly thing. It is rust, it is mold, it is mildew. But a man looks at it and he says, I know, that's bad. Look how bad that is. But look at this. And he'll proceed to tell you about how nice things are when they don't have rust on them, and how nice things are when they aren't moldy or mildewed. And in so doing, he does a very good job of presenting the image that there's hope to get rid of the rust. There's hope to get rid of the mildew. There's hope to get rid of the mold. And the truth of the matter is, there is. There are a plethora of ways of eliminating mold, rust, mildew, and all the other forms of corruption out there. The problem is that invariably, once that man finds himself seated in the halls of power, he proceeds to play his part by pretending that there's just too much rust, there's just too much mold, there's too much mildew. But he'll keep fighting for you. When in reality, what he'll keep doing is keep distracting. By very dint of his position. He will take on a great number of meaningless, useless tasks with fine-sounding names. And he'll tell you that he's part of this organization and that part of part of that organization. And he's part of this select committee and that subcommittee and this committee and all that. And he is, in fact, part of all of those committees, subcommittees, PACs, whatever else there are. And he's a part of those committees and subcommittees and PACs and organizations insofar as his job is to be a distraction of that kind. A distraction of false hope, a distraction of, I'm fighting for the little man. Elect me and I'll keep on fighting for you. Stop me and he will say, yes, but what about this repeal, or what about that enactment? My response to him is, for every repeal, for every enactment, nine others rise in their place. That make that repeal, that enactment, that action, that whatever it is, there are 9 other actions, 9 other lawful orders, 9 other whatever that rise up, and so completely negate the effect of that one repeal and make it of no account. Where you going, guys? Where you going? It's okay. It's okay. There you go, little guys. And so at the end of the day, I have to stop and I have to ask myself more questions. Because at the end of the day, the errancy of this is not in the things that are not done and the things that are done. The errancy of the question is perhaps errancy isn't the right word. I err when I ask the question of why can't more be done? Why not more actions? Why not more subcommittees? Why not more Why not more committees? Why not more subcommittees? Why not more laws? Why not more repeals? Why not more enactments? Without realizing that all of the laws, all of the repeals, all of the enactments, all of the statements, all of the sanctions, all of the injunctions, all of those collected together in the entire world, covered in rust and moth bites and mildew and moss, mold, all of that in the entire world wouldn't have mattered to anything if those who propagate those laws and enactments and injunctions and all of those sanctions and all of those other things, if those individuals themselves are corrupt at heart, then none of those things matter for anything, except insofar as those things in fact continue. Then in point of fact, those things continue to propagate that self-same corruption. And if those things themselves continue to propagate that corruption, then it is in fact point of fact, it is deleterious, not even useless, not even only a little bit useful. It is in fact deleterious to any change, to any advancement, to any progress, to any growth. Because corruption itself is something far different than a thing wearing out and becoming old. Corruption itself is an insidious growth. If I can say anything for this current day and age, it is that the corruption is overtaking the growth, the development. And in many ways, the corruption itself is in fact forestalling the change. Until the point that it has destroyed the thing itself, and it comes forth and says, "This is the new house in which you will live. These are the new shoes that you will wear. This is the new truck that you will drive. And this is the new way in which you will go about your business. Because the corruption itself and those instigators and provocateurs and manipulators and all other agents of that corruption have in fact so thoroughly destroyed the thing itself that in that desperate time, the only thing remaining is to accept what they call change, which is in fact nothing more than to accept the force of that corruption.